Everybody, this is Fistandalus1, and today I'm going to do a video on that oxymoron called a Rare Mosin Nagant. Now, the Mosin-Nagant is a bolt-action, internal magazine-fed military rifle developed by the Imperial Russian Army in about 1882 through 1891. And it was actually adopted in 1891 by the Russian Empire and was later used by the Soviet Union. There are quite a few variants. Quite a few nations use this. Russia, the USSR, Estonia, Finland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Hungary. China had a version. The Poland, and even the United States produced some versions of the Mosin-Nagant. In 1891, the model that came out, they came out with a few different versions. They had the model 1891, the Cossack, and the Dragoon versions. And of course, the Dragoon version and the Cossack version were virtually identical, same length, pretty much same everything. But in 1930, they updated the Model 91, or the Model 1891, to the M9130 spec. Now, the only difference between the M9130 and the 1891 model is, if you'll notice, the rear sights there on the M91 or the 1891 version. Those sights were actually marked in a archaic distance measurement called arsini, and in 1930 they updated them to be marked in meters. They also changed the barrel bands. Now, the barrel bands, there were actually three different style of barrel bands that were used during the course of this rifle's history. Don't ask me which one's which, because I don't know. I just know that this particular type of barrel band is the 1930 type. And basically, here, let me show you on this one. Basically, when you look at it and you rotate it, you'll see that it's kind of a spring-loaded kind of. You see the little notch there. The other difference between the 1891 model and the M9130 is the addition of a hooded front sight that they use to protect the front sight post. But otherwise, that's the only change that they made to the rifle. The M9130 is virtually identical to the Dragoon and Cossack rifles. Alright, now this one that has the sling on it, this is actually a 1942 Izhevsk Arsenal M9130. I don't know if you'll be able to see these markings or not. Let's see if I can get it to focus some. You can barely see it, but if you'll notice, right down there at the bottom of the barrel shank, there's a little triangle with an arrow in it. That is the symbol for the Izhevsk Arsenal. This particular rifle, as I said before, it was produced in 1942, and it has a wartime stock. And how you can tell it's a wartime stock is, if you look here, there's no metal barrel, or excuse me, no metal stock escutcheon in the hole here. It uses what's commonly referred to as a dog collar sling, because this particular portion of the sling looks like a dog collar. and it just goes through the hole in the stock. And then at the front portion, you'll notice it's just a small little piece of metal. One of these days. There we go. And that is, like I said, a wartime production stock. Now, a post-war stock has the metal escutcheon in the rear. If you notice, though, there's no screws. These are actually pressed in. And in the front, you've got another all-metal escutcheon, but once again, no screws here and here. It's also pressed in. So that's probably the easiest way to identify a post-war stock and a wartime stock. A pre-war stock has, as you can see there, screws. These are actually screwed in on both ends. And I apologize for the condition of these rifles. They were pulled out of a crate of 20, and they haven't really been cleaned of all the cosmoline. They've just been wiped down a little bit, except for this one. This one is actually fairly clean. It's actually used on a regular basis to go shooting at the range. But these three were actually borrowed from a friend just so I could do this video. But as I was saying, this one is a 1942 Izhevsk Arsenal M9130. Now this one is about as common as you can get. If I remember correctly, during the war years from 1942 to 1945, there were 17 million of these produced in just that short amount of time. I think over the course of the entire run of this particular rifle, there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 38 to 40 million that were produced. Don't quote me on those numbers. I'd actually have to go check. Let me set that off to the side. But yeah, I'd actually have to go check to make sure, but I think that's what the production numbers were. Now this next rifle is actually a bit rarer than the wartime production rifle that I just showed you. This, let me see if I can get this to show you. But this is actually a 1928 Izhevsk Arsenal hex receiver. Now it's actually not a hexagonal shape, it's actually more like an octagon, but it's commonly referred to as a hex receiver. Now, a hex receiver is a bit rarer than the round receiver wartime production. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the rarest, this is probably a 3 or a 4. I'm probably more inclined to say a 3 because I believe, well, I guess it is all numbers matching with no force matching. So yeah, I would call this maybe a 4 tops. Okay. Now there were multiple arsenals in the Soviet Union that produced these rifles. The most common is the Izhevsk arsenal. The other one is the Tula arsenal. If I remember correctly, in 1942 during Operation Barbarossa, that arsenal was actually overrun by the Germans, and so they had to move production. And that's why a 1942 Tula rifle is actually fairly rare, and I don't believe that they started production up again until 1944. So if you were to find a 1944 Tula or a 1942 Tula, that's actually a very rare rifle for a wartime production rifle. Let me put this one off to the side as well. Now here is where we start getting into that wonderful thing called a Rare Mosin. And you kind of have to take that phrase with a grain of salt, because saying rare and Mosin in the same sentence, people tend to laugh at you. And the reason why this one is a Rare Mosin, even though it has a post-war stock, which was actually put on it after being re-arsenaled after the war, it is also what is called MO marked. I don't know if you guys will be able to see this. Let me see if I can get this to focus in. If you notice right there above the serial number, there's a little mark that says MO. And then when you look at the date, it has a slash and then a second date. This is also a Tula arsenal. There we go. And it was produced in 1926. The MO marking signifies that it was actually issued to the Ministry of Defense. And that's actually a fairly rare marking. Now what the Ministry of Defense was, it was actually the guys that guarded government buildings for the most part. They had their own unique uniform, and they carried Mosin-Nagant rifles. You can also find various Nagant pistols that are ammo marked, and I believe there's been some SKSs that have also been marked MO. But by and far, most of them that you find are actually Mosin-Nagants, the M9130 rifles. Now, the Ministry of Defense was created in, I want to say, 1956. I'm going to have to check on that one as well. And no one really knows what the double date has as far as any meaning. So this is actually a fairly rare rifle. It's maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, you're probably looking at about a 6. Okay. Now, unfortunately, as I said before, it does have a post-war stock on it. You can tell by the escutcheons. And I believe this one is all numbers matching as well. Yes, they're all the pieces are numbers matching. On the Mosin-Nagant, you'll have a serial number on the barrel shank, another serial number on the bolt. Let's see if I can, as you can see right there, right in front of the bolt. Another serial number on the butt plate, on the top of the butt plate. And your last serial number will be on the floor plate of the magazine. Okay, but that's a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10. This last one is the one that I would love to own, and that's because this last one is also MO marked, but it's got something that the other one does not have. And that is, let's see if I can get this to zoom in and focus. And it doesn't really want to. But if you notice, there are 3 dates. Yes, this is a triple date MO marked rifle. Now, once again, it is also in a post-war stock, unfortunately. But it is a triple date MO marked rifle. On a scale of 1 to 10, this is about an 8. Now, unfortunately for this rifle, its butt plate is actually force matched, which, as you can see right there, the serial number of the rifle that the original butt plate was on, or the original rifle that the butt plate was on, was marked out during the re-arsenaling process after the war, and the new serial number for this particular rifle was added. It's still considered to be numbers matching because it was done at Arsenal, but it would be a little bit more desirable if it actually had all original numbers. But like I said, this is about an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as how rare this rifle is. Now, there are some rifles, some Mosins, that are even rarer than this, obviously. The 1907 model is, from my understanding, one of the rarest. There was only something like 3,000 or 4,000 of those made. But once again, nobody really knows how many of these rifles were actually MO marked and had either a double date or a triple date mark on it. As far as how much a rifle like this is worth, you know what, I really have no clue. This particular one, the wartime production one here, is currently going for anything from $129 to $159 at a lot of gun stores. On Gunbroker, I've seen a few of these that are actually going for upwards of $200. So the prices are going up on these things. But when you compare it to this one, the triple date MO marked, this is actually worth quite a bit more, but try and convince somebody of that. It would be worth quite a bit more to a collector, but not necessarily Joe Schmo that wants to buy a rifle and go hunting, or go target shooting, or have a SHTF type cheap gun. But to a collector, it might actually be worth quite a bit more money. But I would love to add that to, or have that in my possession. That would be a great addition. Once again, this has been Fist 1, talking about the Rare Mosin. Okay, thank you once again for joining me, and have a nice day.